Hey, welcome to the Tim and Gugabe podcast. This is your host, Tim Gugabe. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, all good. You?
I'm good, and we also have a special guest here, Brett Appley. I think, Brett, last time you were on, wasn't it Usman and Masvidal?
I honestly have no idea. These cards blur together. So I don't even know what day it is. I don't know what time it is.
Yeah.
I certainly don't remember what the card was the last time we talked, but it's been a while, and yeah, thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, for sure. I think on that one, if I remembered, we went for like 2 hours because we talked about every fight as irrelevant as like Roundtree Prochnio. And we're just going to talk about kind of the 5 fights today. And maybe Brett can also mention, one or two other fights from a DraftKings perspective that he's interested in. And then Gugabe can talk about his plus 2,000 sub prop on later too. But I think that's going to be kind of the format. But before we get started, Brett, one thing I do want to mention, because you are a DraftKings guy and Gugabe and I are not, and that's kind of your specialty and that's what your content focuses on. And there was recently a rule change. Sorry to blindside you with this topic, but I think there was a format change on how they score the fights. So is there anything you want to discuss on that for like a couple minutes before we get into the card?
Sure, yeah, keeping me on my toes.
Sorry,
let's see.
I didn't tell you about this.
No, it's all good. So
Yeah.
DraftKings, some simple changes, quite honestly. They changed significant strikes from 0.5 to 0.4, and now all non-significant strikes are worth 0.2 as opposed to 0. They removed advances entirely and replaced it with this control time metric, which is 0.03 points per second of control time. And I think that adds up to 9 points per 5 minutes of control, which was approximately 3 advances.
Gotcha.
They also added a quick finish bonus for if you win inside the distance in the first 60 seconds of the fight, which really doesn't change much. The only thing that it would help is if a fighter like won by guillotine in the first 60 seconds, where they wouldn't get a knockdown, they wouldn't get strikes. So sometimes they'd get screwed in that regard. But now that would help them. And in terms from a like overall perspective, I think we're going to see grapplers actually excel more in this new system, which people I still don't really think understand how big of an impact going from 0.5 points per significant strike to 0.4 is. And I tried to start the year. I was like, hey, this is a great example. Max Holloway, he's going to land 120, 130 significant strikes at range. But with this new scoring system, he might miss the optimal lineup. He's going to be 50% owned. So let's go a little bit lighter on him. And then he absolutely blew it out of the water, set the DraftKings record. So did not work then, but we're still playing around with the new scoring system. I think it's going to be good though.
Cool. Yeah. And so are you saying it will favor grapplers mostly because of the total strikes? Because that's something they maybe wouldn't have gotten credit for, top strikes like they would now?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, takedowns.
Like
yes. Like takedowns always score well, right?
Yeah,
5 points per takedown. And it looks bad that they got rid of advances because you can, get 10 advances in a fight and put up 30 points. But and the 0.3 seconds per control doesn't seem great, but then it adds up when you got a guy. When you got a guy like Chiesa who's laying on top of Magny for 20 minutes, it adds up. The non-significant strikes add up. Whereas if you're a range striker, you don't have any other method to get to score. So it just unless you're going to win by knockout or grapple, it's tough.
Okay. Yeah. I figured I didn't know about the first 60-second thing, but I had seen some of your tweets on the others. So I haven't played DraftKings in forever. So I wasn't sure, but cool. Good to know. So if you have any comments, the listeners can keep that in mind. But Let's just start with the main event right out of the gate. And Gugabe, I'll throw it to you. McGregor and Poirier, just from a betting perspective or just a fight preview perspective, what do you think of this?
My strategy is always McGregor is kind of early round props, look for the in-play, and also if you've got exchange access, just wait till the last second because McGregor money is stupid.
Yeah.
Like Poirier could hit plus 400 on the exchange if you're willing to wait for the last 5 minutes. It's just like, I'm willing to take that. Like Poirier's beaten kind of like 2 top 20 pound for pound guys since the last time McGregor beat a live body. Like, I mean, I understand he starts fast. Poirier has issues with fast starters and defensive issues. But still, it's just like Conor McGregor's kind of a question mark. I think it's hard to justify this kind of pricing. This kind of pricing assumes he gets a KO1, in my opinion. This money line pricing.
Yeah, or at least an early, first.
At least he blows him out of the water.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I pretty much see what you're saying. But Brett, do you have anything to add? And I'm sure from a DraftKings perspective, you would want exposure to this fight. It's a 5-round striking fight where, I mean, I guess unless if I'm missing something, because I know DraftKings is dependent on other fights on the card, but I'm guessing you'd want some type of exposure here because the winner would probably score well in a decision and a knockout too. But like you said, the range striking thing could make things weird if it went to a decision. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically you would, right? But it's kind of just what we talked about with the striking metric. So if McGregor goes out there at 9.1K and lands 120 strikes in 5 rounds, I mean, he is not going to be on the winning lineup.
Yeah.
But if he gets 1 knockdown, 2 knockdowns, a finish, he lucks into some control time against the cage, or who knows, then there are ways for him to score more. But he's 9.1K, Poirier is 7.1K. I am curious, you guys, because I agree, based on the line, I feel like they're crediting McGregor with a pretty strong chance to win very early, and I think he might have a good chance at that. But what is your perceived path to victory for Poirier? Because I don't really think he's going to have much success grappling. I mean, you guys probably consider McGregor a good grappler, whereas the majority of the MMA community thinks he sucks. But I think McGregor's an underrated grappler. I don't really see that path to victory being there for Poirier. So it's either like a total cardio failure from Conor or just a 5-round war. Is that your guys' perceptive?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, Southpaw shuts down a lot of what Conor does in the counter. Like Conor's counter game is predicated on that sort of pull left straight, which I think he's very good at using it. But if you start playing Southpaw to Southpaw, it just kind of disappears. And Poirier's a lot busier, in my opinion.
Yeah, Brett, I pretty much agree with you. Neither of these guys land a ton of takedowns, and I would say both of their takedown defense is pretty reasonable. And McGregor is very much an underrated grappler, especially defensively. But yeah, it's tough because I don't see, from a betting perspective, I would be a little surprised if Poirier won the first round, and I guess his path to victory would be a cardio failure or just kind of. Poirier still landed 128 significant strikes against Holloway, so it's like I could see the fight getting, maybe a little interesting later, but I still think Conor should get off to an early lead. And it's tough because I think McGregor has a very good chin. And so it's like he has a good chin, and I don't think Poirier will win the first round. So he really does have to have such a pretty big comeback. But at the same time, you always do have that striking variance type of thing where, Ponzinibbio always had a good chin and then he got knocked out, right? So you never really know on calling knockouts. But I think McGregor should probably win, but it was really just the Nate Diaz fights where he gassed out. I think his cardio might be a little overblown, but he did realistically slow down in those fights. So I could see it. Like, I'm not going to rush out to play McGregor, but I think he's the rightful favorite. And I don't know. Does that answer your question, Brett? And is there anything that...
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, Dustin landed 178 significant strikes against Holloway. So the volume,
78, yeah.
The volume can be there. I mean, there's just I couldn't play Conor at this line. Like, for me to play Conor at this line, I would have to know that he does have cardio to go 5 rounds, and maybe it's overblown a tad, but like, I don't think was in good enough shape for that first Diaz fight, and it cost him. And then he trained obviously much harder for the second fight, and it's kind of hard to know where he's at. I mean, I want to trust him, but at minus 300, it feels like too big of a risk.
Yeah, you're kind of just speculating at that point. It's kind of a speculation fight on the cardio, right? Because we really don't know exactly how Conor will look late, so why risk money on that? And with Poirier, like, I understand how you could make an argument just with his metrics are legitimately good, but I still do think he will lose early, and I do think it's realistic for McGregor to get an early knockout. So just looking to play him live would probably be smarter, just so you can kind of see how the fight's going and mitigate that early McGregor risk. That's kind of I'm not going to have any action on this fight pre-fight, but that's kind of my thoughts. But Gugabe, anything else to add, or should we move on to the co-main event?
Not really. I think the layoff from McGregor also adds much volatility. Like, I mean, I don't think he's going to get much better than he was. So it's just like, it's like Ponzinibbio. It's just like, if McGregor comes out firing all cylinders, his price is probably right, maybe a bit too high.
Yeah.
If McGregor slips at all, he's probably overpriced. So it's kind of like, I just don't see much downside in the Poirier bet at this point.
Yeah. And just to mention, Poirier got outlanded in the first 3 rounds, or the first 2 rounds, by Hooker at distance pretty dramatically. And then he really kind of relied on coming on strong. So I feel like that adds more to the narrative of this fight, where Poirier will be reliant on later success.
I think Hooker is comparative to McGregor at this point, honestly. Again, particularly I just don't like McGregor in a southpaw to southpaw matchup. I think it shuts down a lot of what he does best.
Yeah. Brett, were you going to say something?
No. I mean, and not particularly. I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying.
Yeah, I feel like there will be a consensus mostly, on that fight. But next fight, I'm much more interested in this fight, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this. Sorry, my phone's going off. But Dan Hooker and Michael Chandler, for the listeners who are not familiar, Chandler is coming from Bellator. He was a long-reigning champion at some point there. I actually grew up wrestling with him too. He's from St. Louis. Nice guy. But Brett, let's throw it off to you first. What do you think about this one? And I know you really focus on UFC. I feel like you don't watch many other organizations, but you tape studied Chandler, right, to kind of figure him out.
Yeah. I focus on the UFC in terms of tape studying, because I have to write 1,000 words for every single fight on every card, so I just don't have time. But yeah, of course I looked into Chandler for this one, and I think that there's a little bit of value on Hooker, to be honest. And I hate betting against wrestlers because it's a lower variance art. And if you're the better wrestler, you're probably going to land some takedowns. And in a 3-round fight, that's all you need. And I do think Chandler could and probably will, land a takedown or two. But I feel like, conceptually, Bellator fighters and fighters in other promotions, whether it's regional, whether it's Contender Series, PFL, are probably a bit overvalued coming into the UFC. Just the level of competition is so much worse. And it's not to say Chandler's a bad fighter. He's hasn't fought anyone good, but it's just, it's not comparable to the resume that Hooker has. And I wasn't that impressed by Chandler, to be quite honest. Like, he wrecks weak grapplers, but he struggles against anyone decent. And then on the feet, he's very predictable, and he doesn't have many tools. He throws like a lunging right hand, and he's got a right body kick, and he's very powerful, but the power, also ties closely in with cardio. So yeah, I think Chandler could have some moments early, but I think Hooker's a better striker. I mean, he's a lot taller, he's a lot longer. He's gonna love the fact that Chandler will be aggressively entering the pocket, so he can counter, and he's got tricky knees and a guillotine and elbows, and so I think there's a pretty good chance that for the last 10-12 minutes of the fight, Hooker will kind of be picking apart Chandler on the feet, and so it's just a question of, can Chandler do so much damage early on that it doesn't matter? Can he knock Hooker out, or can he land enough takedowns and control Hooker on the mat long enough to win a decision? And it's possible. I don't quite think it's a 50-50 fight though.
Yeah, Gugabe, you have any opinions here?
Yeah, about broadly the same. Chandler struggled to win minutes, especially standing against like mid-tier Bellator competition. He doesn't really deal well with kicks or anything beyond sort of meat and potatoes. Punching, his control wrestling, unless you're just completely shit at grappling, is pretty just lampreyish. Yeah, I personally don't think. I think Chandler could be kind of just fringe top 15 UFC lightweight, if that. Like, I think there's people who are like unranked UFC lightweights I'd be interested in playing against him, put it that way. Like, if you gave me close Chandler, I'd be interested. Or close, close.
Yeah.
He's okay, but I'm almost not entirely sold on Hooker. I think Hooker kind of had a fortunate run to the top rankings. He's kind of weirdly put together. Like, he makes his thing work, but like, there are questions about how good Hooker is off his back. Like, he's got good reactive takedown defense, city kickboxing, good tall man guillotines, that sort of stuff. I'm just not sure how well he does if he actually gets put shoulders to the mat. Yeah, but again, like, I'm seeing some places trending to Hooker minus 110. I think that's very playable. Like, I mean, Chandler's, not to get purely just levels. It's like, has Chandler beat anybody except the top 20 UFC lightweight, apart from Alvarez back in the day?
No, and I'm not as high on Alvarez as many people. And no, he has not. He beat Ben Henderson, and Henderson has not done great in Bellator. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's funny because even Will Brooks, like Chandler, if he doesn't win by knockout, he generally wins by like wrestling you. And with like even Will Brooks, a guy who could stop takedowns, he kind of runs into a wall and runs out of ideas. Like Brett said, he doesn't have much striking depth. He kind of just lunges overhands and hopes they knock you out. He can close distance well just because he has that athletic background, so he can land a big shot. But yeah, I totally agree, Gugabe.
Also, the issue with Dan Hooker is, like, if you look for his record, who is a really good wrestler that he's beaten? Like, Felder's not awful, Quinter's not awful, but there's nobody, it's not like he hasn't really got the record of beating, like, solid people going for consistent takedown attempts on him. I don't know. It's a bit tricky.
Yeah, so what I would say to that is, people are going to laugh at this, but I do think Mark Jacasey is an underrated grappler. He lands 2.16 takedowns per 15. And I mean, he landed 4 takedowns on Lando Venata, and Venata isn't bad as a defensive wrestler. So that was one. The other time we saw Hooker defensively have to grapple, where he kind of got put on the mat, was Jason Knight. But Jason Knight only held him down, and Hooker's really improved. Like that fight was a very long time ago. Jason Knight mostly got his control off a body triangle, which Chandler doesn't really have body triangles in his game. When you actually lay in Hooker's guard, he generally can get up better by like giving up his back and popping up. I do think Chandler, I agree with you guys on all point, and I think Hooker is actually, I think he's a very good striker in a 3-round fight. If you look at his first 3 rounds against Felder and Poirier, he outstruck them very cleanly and would have won both of those fights clean on the cards. It's just later he didn't do well. But so I think he'll pick Chandler apart on the feet unless if he gets randomly knocked out. But I don't think the Chandler knockout is as likely as other people might think. But I think my biggest fear on here, and I think where Chandler does thrive the most, but again, it was against weak competition. He does land ground and pound from top position. And I just feel like ground and pound really gets overlooked because if you hold someone down, and even if they pop up with just a minute left and they start landing on you, they can steal back the round. Where if you land ground and pound and then someone pops up, they might not steal back the round. And I just think that is important. It's just I feel like we haven't seen a ton of Hooker having to get back up recently. So there is a little bit of question mark, but he defends takedowns at 79%. And I don't think Chandler's that great of a wrestler. I think he's a good wrestler, but I don't know. I do think he will struggle to get Hooker down consistently. Like he might land a couple takedowns, but really is 2 takedowns going to lead to, 8 minutes of control time? I don't know. Brett, do you have anything? I know I just ranted.
I think you would probably project Chandler for like 1 to 3 takedowns over the course of 15 minutes, which is on the high end enough to maybe do some damage, but I don't think it's a lock that he gets 3. The other point I wanted to make is like I don't know if Chandler's very durable, and Dan Hooker is very durable. So it's not only like in terms of precision and length and all that stuff. I think Hooker has a very legitimate shot at knocking Chandler out. He gets hurt often, and by not even the best competition. And Hooker, while you could get knocked out by anyone, has shown extreme durability. So that does give me confidence.
Yeah. From a DraftKings perspective, I'd imagine you'd be pretty interested in this fight because Hooker, I do think he has a good chance for a knockout, and Chandler, he could potentially land one and maybe has a wrestling path, so maybe he could come through. I don't know what their price at or anything, so I'm just kind of talking out loud, but what is your opinion here on a DraftKings perspective?
Well, interestingly enough, Hooker's 8.5K and Chandler's 7.7K. So I suspect with the line moving down, Hooker's about minus 130 on books that I'm seeing right now. I mean, Chandler plus 110 is a value at 7.7K, especially as a theoretical wrestler or an early finisher. I don't know what his inside distance line is, plus 375, which is not great. It's one of those things where the positive to Hooker now being theoretically overpriced is that his ownership is not going to be that high. Like I don't think Hooker's going to be super popular at 8.5K as a near pick'em. When he must get a knockout. If he goes out there and lands 80 strikes, 100 strikes, that's not going to be enough with the scoring. So I think he has to get a knockout, and that hurts him. But if his ownership is going to be reduced because of the pricing, I mean, he makes for a high upside play, a fighter with a high ceiling. So I like him. And then Chandler, it turns into one of these fights where I'm probably just going to be very heavy on it across the board because Chandler, it's hard to overlook him at 7.7K. As a value. I won't be as heavy as the field personally. I'll be underweight to the field on Chandler. I'll have less exposure than the field, but to someone who likes him and wants to play him, I would say he's a perfectly acceptable target at that price because he's a value and because he has a theoretical grappling upside.
So if you had like 10 lineups, you'd maybe throw like 1 or 2 Chandlers in there or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think people could go higher than that, but me personally, I'd have a couple, and I'd probably have 4 Hooker or something like that to try and be a little bit over on the field.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a fun fight. I tend to lean Hooker there, but again, who the fuck knows? Moving on to, let's go to Ribas and Rodriguez, just because I think both of these girls have good things going for them. Gugabe, let's have you start on this one. What do you think here?
I am fairly agnostic about Rebus. Like, she's good. I personally don't really see why she's like this massive she's five against everybody. The question here is going to be whether she grapples or not. If she gets stuck on the feet, or if she decides she's a kickboxer, Marina is way too wide at that price. Marina might be like a top 3 striker in the division, just purely kickboxing. I picked up some Rebus submission at plus 330 because I'm just like, it's one of these things where it's like, if Rebus is getting takedowns / actually doing the right thing, submission probably looks live. If Rebus is not doing the right thing, submission probably looks bad, but also the money line looks shit. But I'd rather be holding a plus 330 than a minus 300. Marina has serious issues off her back, but also I think she good chance wins this striking match. Rebus is stupid enough to give it to her. Also, the RTD is kind of tempting, but I don't know.
Yeah, Brett, what are your thoughts here? I'm high on Rebus, and I imagine you are too. I'm not saying for this particular fight, but just in general.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Rebus as a fighter. I am a little bit concerned about this fight, to be quite honest. And I try not to listen to interviews, and I try not to look up stuff, but something came across my plate that had Rebus saying, everyone wants me to grapple, but I want to prove that I'm a striker, and I want to surprise people. And that doesn't mean anything in some sense, but in another sense, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if she goes out there and tries to strike, because up until this point in the UFC, she really hasn't been tested. So there's no reason for her to believe that she's going to lose on the feet. And Rodriguez is very dangerous. Absolutely could see Rodriguez winning rounds if this fight plays out on the feet. At the same time, you have to factor in the grappling to some degree. And while Rebus is not, 10 out of 10 skilled, she's good enough to get this fight to the ground a couple times, and from there, I mean, it could be one takedown leads to a 10-8 round with Rodriguez. So I like Rebus to win. What is she though? Minus 300. There's enough. Again, at minus 300, I would want to know for sure that Rebus has a grappling based game plan. And I just don't. I think there's a good chance that she goes out there and strikes for a while. Still picking her to win, but this fight will be very competitive, and she might lose during striking exchanges.
Yeah, both of them are good strikers, but it's just, if it does stay there, who would you pick to win straight up? Like, I would maybe favor Marina. Like, I'm not saying for sure, because I think Rebus is quite a good striker, but this is by far the best striker she's faced. And even just girls like Tisha Torres, Marina absolutely obliterated on the numbers. So, and Cynthia Calvillo is not completely awful on the feet either, and Marina obliterated her too. So it's
I'd favor Rodriguez.
I probably would too. I don't think it's a lock, but I would probably favor her. And Gugabe, would you as well?
Definitely Lena. Like, I mean, Marcos was competitive on distance striking with Rebus
For a little bit, yeah. So
I mean, she got the fuck beaten out of later on, but like in terms of early, it's just
yeah. And it's just it's like, yeah, Rebus can outstrike Dern, Marcos, Paige Van Zandt, Emily Whitmire. It's like none of those girls strike. So you don't even really know how she'll look against someone like Marina. We know Marina can outstrike, B level strikers by a lot. So that's one thing. I will say, like, even if Rebus goes for takedowns, it's weird because sometimes Marina's takedown defense looks like shit, but it doesn't all the time. And I do feel like Carla's kind of double leg game is a little different than what Rebus does, because sometimes Marina shows decent takedown defense. So that's another factor. I feel like if Rebus goes to the grappling, I tend to think she would probably get it to the floor, but I wouldn't be shocked if Marina did stop a takedown here or there. So that's another thing. And then on the mat, I do think Rebus is very good. So I think that's where she could thrive. And so I'd probably favor her to win, but I would probably lower this line a little bit. but I'm excited. I like both of these girls, and I think Marina in like a pure kickboxing fight, like she stylistically would match up well with someone like Zhang, even who maybe won't go for as many takedowns. Like I feel like Marina can beat elite competition in the right style. But from a DraftKings point of view, do you have any interest here, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, this one is tough because like you kind of either got to buy into it or not.
Yeah.
Ribas has a chance to land multiple takedowns, to dominate on the mat, and she's in a price range. She's priced between Roundtree and McGregor. So, who neither of those guys are going to end up on the winning lineup if they don't win with an early knockout. Even though both is somewhat likely, Ribas I still think has high upside even for a high price. It's just you gotta really buy into her, probably winning this fight by submission or dominating on the mat. And if you think that there's a chance that this fight plays out on the feet for any length of time, I mean, Rodriguez is one of the cheapest fighters on the slate at $7K.
If Marina won by decision, would she make the optimal lineup? I don't know about draft.
Yeah, not for sure, but probably just because she's so cheap that you'll need her to, pay up for Roundtree or McGregor, whoever. And in this bottom tier, it's like, Hack, Parast, Poirier, Rodriguez, Prachniow, and Nick Lentz. So I don't know that I'm going to have a ton of exposure to this range, but if I was dipping down this low, I would consider Rodriguez just for the theoretical path to victory on the feet. Though it would be hard for me to make any like real significant investment there.
For sure.
Prachniow is going to set the DK record. I'm calling it.
I was actually going to ask you about that one because he'll be like 5% owned, and the fight's minus like 165 to go under 1.5 rounds. So it has Slate Buster written all over it.
And Khalil Roundtree does gas pretty spectacularly.
And he's been rocked many times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying go all in on Prachniow, but I just think he's a bit wide at his current price.
He might be. I mean, it's funny because Tim made the joke about this fight earlier, and I
had a feeling it would be interesting from a DraftKings. So I figured we'd fucking end.
Because there's going to be so, especially if you're trying to win, there's $200,000 to first place in the main DraftKings tournament. If you're trying to win first place, you got to take some weird risks like that. And it's not that I would recommend playing Prachniow in 30% of your lineups, but like, I mean, if this guy has any legitimate chance of winning, it's probably going to be an early knockout, and he's going to be solo owned against a fighter who's one of the most popular on the entire slate. So I've been toying with the idea of Prachniow this week.
Also, does he have a grappling path? Like, because I mean, I haven't watched his regional because if believe it or not, I haven't looked into this fight yet. But can Prachniow he's just been knocked out so many times, but does he wrestle a little bit on the regionals? For some reason, I thought he did occasionally, and it wouldn't take too much to, have some success against Roundtree. Do you guys know? I just haven't looked into it.
Does pop up sometimes, but again, like Roundtree versus Prachniow in an ADCC match, I have no fucking idea. Like,
I wouldn't take Roundtree.
People. Hopefully, we never get DK would be Roundtree could just gas, and Prachniow could land just endless strikes.
Yeah,
I mean, I think he could knock him out. I think he could knock him out cold early, just because. I mean, Roundtree's been. I don't know if Prachniow has more than 3 minutes of gas himself, and I think we're going to get Muay Thai Khalil again here. So, for me, it would be more about the early knockout, which is gross, but I don't know. I feel like there's something there.
Yeah. Okay, let's pivot away from this one though. But I do agree, like that. You're going to have exposure to that fight, right? Just because of the under, Brett.
Well, I mean,
Now that we're on the
theoretically,
fucking topic.
theoretically, but like
Yeah.
Khalil Roundtree is one of the most expensive fighters on the slate, so he must get an early knockout to be on the optimal lineup. And if this fight, whatever the hell his name is, got a knockout today in the second round, and it happened like 5 seconds into round 2, and like he didn't quite score enough. So it's never black and white. Theoretically, Villanueva. I knew his name, by the way.
Yeah.
Theoretically, you'd want exposure here, but it's never black and white.
Just because you are kind of relying on first round KO, so it's narrow. But okay, so I think we talked about that fight long enough. I'm getting the fuck away from it. But yeah, Ribas Rodriguez, I think we all have pretty similar opinions. Sarukian and Hack Perez. I'll just start on this one. I think Sarukian is the rightful favorite. It's almost like the Ribas Rodriguez dynamic because I feel like he has a grappling path to victory where Hack Perez does not. But if this plays out on the feet, Nasrat's a good striker with good metrics, and Arman can strike as well, but we've only really seen him do it against Davi Ramos, and he looked good, but it's Davi Ramos, and Nasrat, his metrics just check out way more. So I'm just saying I wouldn't be happy if this stayed striking, and I'm stuck with Sarukian at minus 275, and it's not like Sarukian is a good wrestler, but even OAM at times stopped takedowns and kept the fight standing. So I don't think it's impossible for this fight to stay standing for a while. So that's kind of my problem with Arman's line being this wide. But I do agree, just when you have likely a competitive striking fight, and someone has a grappling path to victory, I generally think they should always be favored. But Brett, what do you think on this one?
Yeah, I think you have to favor Sarukian, and I think the line's too wide. He's a very good wrestler, but I'm not convinced that he can land takedowns consistently throughout 3 rounds. And I'm also not convinced he can do much with them in top position because he hasn't shown to be much of a submission grappling threat thus far. He could control Hack Parast for a while, but Hack Parast is very good. He's very well rounded, and he's coming off a fight in which he defended a lot of takedowns. So I was really interested looking into the striking of Sarukian because, like, in my head, it was like, well, if he can't get the takedowns, then Hack Parast is going to beat him. But after, even just watching that fight against Davi Ramos, I don't. It's hard to say. I think it would be competitive. The trouble with, in Hack Parast's sake, the trouble with Sarukian is that he's so unwilling to engage in extended exchanges that he's like not absorbing anything. He's all the way out or he's all the way in and he's wrestling on you. So if the fight plays out on the feet, as much as I think Hack Parast is a better boxer, Sarukian might just be 10 feet away from him throwing kicks, and then with Hack Parast chasing him down. So I was curious what your guys's read was in terms of striking exchanges.
I kind of agree with that, and also I think Sarukian struggles a bit to manufacture shots from the outside. Like, he's very good once he gets like a scramble opportunity, but I'm just not. It's not like he's shooting power doubles from fucking kilometers out. So it's just kind of like we just saw Sarukian. I mean, we just saw Nasrat look very good on the sort of defensively aware against Munoz, whatever his name is. So it's like I think there's still elements of that he could copy for this.
Yeah, what do you think about the striking exchanges, Gugabe? Because I kind of agree with Brett on Sarukian. He just kind of reminds me of a lot of these fighters who are very smart and kind of limit exchanges. I don't think it will be as easy as Nasrat just landing a bunch of volume if it stays standing. What do you think?
It's kind of it's not like his day. It's not like it's gonna be Davi Ramos again.
Yeah.
It's kind of tricky because, like, OAM did compete to a certain degree. OAM was perfectly competitive in distance striking, and it's like, maybe he's improved since then, but I don't know. Sorokin's he's got some areas of his game which are very good, but also just some very disjointed bits of it, I guess, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the thing. I just, because also that OAM fight, it's not like he just wiped out OAM on the feet, and he went 2 of 11 of takedowns, and that's a good and bad thing. I love that he will attempt a lot, and so he'll probably land a couple takedowns here, but it's like, what if he doesn't have extended control? I just don't trust him at this line, and I don't necessarily think he will. Like, I understand the line, but it just also makes me nervous. Brett, did we cover any of your questions, or do you have anything else to add?
I mean, I guess I wanted to make sure that I wasn't like too crazy. I don't necessarily consider this a striker versus grappler matchup where, if the fight plays out on the feet, then Haqparast is for sure going to be winning. And I kind of
I don't think so either. No.
Yeah. And yeah, the other question I had coming into the analysis was just how much Tsarukyan could do once he gets top position, because that obviously goes in that factors into projection a lot, but neither of you think of him as a strong, threatening submission grappler.
No, I does a lot of good things with like back control, and I do think he could get some moments of control, but I don't think he'll sub Nasrat or anything. But it's tough though. Like, one guy has control upside on the mat and the other does not, and you can't overlook that.
Right. You have to favor Tsarukyan for that reason.
For sure. From a DraftKings perspective, I would personally pass on this fight, but what do you think, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, Tsarukyan has some upside if he can land 4 takedowns and control the fight on the mat for a long period of time. Like, he's actually scored pretty well.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of non-significant strikes. Like, for example, his fight against OAM, he landed 2 takedowns. He landed 47 significant strikes, but he landed 63 non-significant strikes and had nearly 8 minutes of control. So if he puts up those same numbers, well, I guess it's only 86 points. So he has mid-80s upside, which now that I look at it, still probably is not enough at that price tag, especially when he's next to Azaitar and Connor and Ribas and Khalil. So I would lean toward being generally light on this fight, I think.
Yeah, I was just thinking, just because I imagine this would probably go to the cards, and Tsarukyan, I feel like, would probably need a finish to justify that price, and end up in the optimal lineup. But I guess if he had some insane dominant grappling performance, he could maybe get there. But I don't know the chances of that are extremely high, but who knows?
Yeah, like, is he aggressive enough to actually keep pushing the tempo? Also, Haqparast no scorecards is plus 100. Seems like a logical place to take it.
Yeah, I don't have strong opinions on that. Like, I just think both guys are very durable too.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So how does Tsarukyan finish him? Like, submission? I don't know. Like, Haqparast at least has clear power.
I think it would be more likely a knockout, honestly, just because Haqparast was just knocked out. I mean, granted, by Drew Dober, but if there was a finish, my guess is it would be a knockout. Though, yeah, I would probably lean toward Haqparast of the two.
Haqparast decision plus 527. That's like, and I just like don't see him getting a finish. I don't see a sub, and I'd be pretty surprised by a knockout. So that was one. Just because, like you said, Tsarukyan does limit exchanges a lot and will probably try to grapple. So I feel like if Haqparast wins, it would probably be by decision. And so plus 527, I don't know if people want to like use that as an ARB type of thing too, but that just jumped off the page for me, but I don't really care too much. But let's move on to another fight, just because Andrew Sanchez is kind of my boy. But Muradov and Andrew Sanchez. I didn't even try to pronounce his first name. Gugabe, what do you think here?
I like the over. I think it's a good chance of being quite tepid.
Yeah.
Again, like sometimes Sanchez decides to go to a boxing war, which surprised me last time. Like I was fairly strong on Sanchez, and most of my action was on the decision last time against Turman. But yeah, I think this could be quite tepid kind of a thing. Could just say just sort of quite boring sort of split decision kind of a thing, honestly. I'm kind of curious how Sanchez deals with the kicking game and sort of the outside distance stuff, but Muradov's boxing defense is pretty fucking poor. Like Chirico is landing pretty consistently.
Yeah. Brett, do you have any opinions here?
Well, Muradov's metrics certainly look a lot better.
Yeah.
So I have a suspicion, Tim, that you're on Muradov here. I mean, he's defending strikes at 64%. I just think he's much faster than Sanchez and a sharper boxer. And I don't know for sure that Sanchez can get his grappling game going. And even if he does, he have cardio issues. So I don't know. I think it's even just looking at his fight record, right? Like he outstruck Marcus Perez by a little bit. He barely outstruck Barrio, and then he fought Marvin Vettori and just got absolutely schooled. And I mean, Muradov is not Vettori, but I kind of feel like, I mean, I'm considering a bet on Muradov, quite honestly, because I think the fight plays out primarily on the feet, and I think Muradov is just more effective and more likely to land strikes and less likely to absorb them.
Yeah, pretty much. I wanted, as much as I wanted to back my boy Sanchez win over Turman, but it's tough though, because it's like, yeah, Muradov defends strikes at 64%, but you know, half of that time is against Trevor Smith. So that's one thing. But Muradov has looked very, very sharp as a striker, just in general, except kind of the thing is he kind of did gas against Alessio like a little bit in the third round. Like he definitely slowed down. And if you just look at the metrics, like he was up huge in the first couple rounds, and then Alessio actually did outstrike him late. So that was one thing. But like you said, Sanchez doesn't have the best cardio either, so he might not take advantage of that. But I just feel like Sanchez is too hittable because he doesn't defend strikes very, very well. And Muradov just lands. That's what he does, and he lands hard. And I feel like he's a little faster. And I just don't trust either guy to have. I think both guys defend takedowns at 100%. So you're likely going to get a striking fight. And I just feel like Muradov will definitely get off to an early lead. And I'm not totally sold on Sanchez, becoming a KO artist either. So yeah, like I pretty much agree with you, Brett. I favor Muradov here.
Yeah, it is hard. It's hard because of the sample size. There's only 2 fights, but
Yeah.
So there's definitely a bit of speculation, but just in the sense that he's fought, 15 minutes and 14 minutes, and he hasn't allowed anyone to 40 strikes yet. I just think he's got a much higher floor of strikes landed here, and Sanchez is probably going to be playing from behind, and I think Muradov's got athletic advantages too. So I wouldn't touch this at minus 200, but it's like what, minus 130, minus 140. It's kind of piquing my interest.
Yeah, for sure. And as much as I love Sanchez, I always say, if he didn't, first round knockouts get overrated. And if this fight was before that Turman fight, Muradov would probably be minus 175, minus 185 here. I personally think he'd be a bigger favorite here. What do you think, Gugabe?
Oh, way bigger favorite. Like Muradov has that kind of overhype behind him. I just don't like his functional pocket defense. Like Chirico was able to land pretty easily when he got there, and Muradov's takedown defense is also kind of a question. Like, I mean, there's some evidence for it regionally, but against great competition.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, and there's a few issues. Again, like Sanchez's cardio. Like Sanchez, I assume this fight should be contested at a pretty lazy tempo. So I can't imagine either of them gassing. Well, they shouldn't. But like, if one of them just turned out like death gas at some point, it's just like because like Muradov gassed pretty hard against Jericho and Sanchez has gassed pretty hard in the past. So you never know if one just decides that they're just having a shutdown on cardio.
Yeah, the one reservation that I have, Brett, just it is a striking fight, so shit happens. And not only is our striking fights higher variance because like knockdowns and shit can happen, but they're higher variance because judges can interpret shit differently. Where, grappling fights, if it goes to decision, it's pretty much who is on top, right? Like it made the Chiesa fight very, very easy to judge today. But one of the things that I have is Sanchez has outlanded almost everyone at distance in his career except Vettori, and I do think Vittori is very, very good, especially from like a distance striking numbers. So those are kind of the reasons why I wouldn't go big on Muradov if I did end up betting him. And what do you think about that?
Well, of course, I mean, in a striking based fight, yeah, it's a much higher variance. They're higher variance exchanges, so it's not typically the type of fight that I like to bet on, especially at chalk odds, which this isn't, but especially at chalk odds, and unless the numbers are telling me otherwise. And it's hard to look at Andrew Sanchez's competition and again, he's outlanded Marcus Perez and Barriot and Ryan James and Anthony Smith and Trevor Smith. It just doesn't mean anything to me. So and then he got tripled up by Marvin Vettori. So do I think Sanchez can win? I definitely do. I don't think he. I don't think it's a 50-50 fight exactly, and I would favor Muradov probably a little bit above 60%, just off the top of my head. But yeah, it definitely is the type of fight that could get hairy, and end of the day, one judge scores it, for you and two against you. Wouldn't really be a surprise.
Just adding in quickly, I think the JTD is a decent price, like minus 110-ish. Like Muradov doesn't seem particularly urgent. Sanchez's chin issue has been more cardio related, and I just don't think he's going to have to work at that pace. And like Muradov decision is playing Frost 350, which I think is reasonable. I'm expecting just a split decision.
What is Muradov no scorecards minus 265? I'd be shocked if Sanchez won inside the distance. I could see Muradov winning by KO, but doesn't seem like a super likely outcome.
Yeah, I don't get why Muradov KO RTD is plus 168 and Muradov decision is plus 350. Like I'd put GTD way close to like minus 200-ish, and I'd probably put Muradov decision way close to like plus 150-ish. I just think Sanchez is generally pretty good at creating tepid fights. Like the Terman fight was kind of a disruption to what he usually does, and I don't think he's going to get into that many more wars.
Yeah, and his only KO losses are cardio KO losses, not it's not like he was knocked out cold.
Yeah, and it's just
Ryan James is weird because he had such a crazy round one against Ryan James. He just cardio deft. Like he was beating the shit out of Ryan James.
Yeah, more so he killed them so much where he hit pretty much a dead body to where he gassed out.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the implied odds right now, Brett, are 50.45%. So it's like if you cap Muradov at 60 to 65, which I think is reasonable, then you could probably pull a trigger on a bet. And I tend to think that's probably where I would put Muradov, like somewhere in that range. Maybe he has more upside. Maybe we're missing something and he does not. But I think it's a reasonable line. So he could probably be, minus 170-ish to minus 200 or something around there. But so, yeah, I could see. I do think there's probably value on the line.
Sweet. Yeah, that sounds about what my expectation would be.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that's pretty much all the fights we're going to talk about. Maybe just 5 more minutes. Hopefully, Gugabe don't change the subject here and make us talk about something stupid. I'm just kidding. But is there anything, Gugabe, like from a prop point of view that you like, or any other just fight you have a bet on?
I haven't taken anything. I like Sarah McMahon against Juliana Pena. Issue was the age, but like I just kind of feel like it's wrestler versus wrestler, and McMahon should just kind of be better at that. And like Pena doesn't really offer much in terms of random opportunism. But again, like McMahon is 40, which is a consideration. But like if McMahon just turned out to be a better positional grappler and just positional grappled her easily, I would not be shocked. Like I took like my average is like plus 103 because I got on very early, but like I still think there's value it. I think if McMahon wins, it will look like hindsight minus 200, minus 250. Is one of these things.
Fair enough. Brett, I have a feeling you agree with that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, yeah, because I was talking to Tim this week or last week about it. He was telling me how much he liked Juliana Pena here. No,
that's not true.
McMahon was the other fighter I was going to bring up that I'm considering to bet on, and I think there's value there. And it's mostly just I feel like the fight's going to come down to who earns top position, who earns more top position. Like I just don't. I see the fight taking place in wrestling exchanges. Juliana Pena defends takedowns at 28%. I have not been impressed with her since she returned to the UFC. She's not an effective striker. McMahon's a much better wrestler than her, and I'm very confident McMahon's going to get takedowns. It's how much do you factor in McMahon dominating round one and then giving up 1 inch and Pena taking a mile and Pena like randomly winning by submission, or she has that Charles Oliveira factor. Unfortunately, where it's like
she's a front runner.
Yeah, like I really want to trust her, and I probably will, but to some degree, I know that she might give up 1 takedown after winning 2 rounds, and she could get submitted there. But for minus 130, where I think she's clearly the better wrestler. I do like McMahon in this spot.
Yeah, I haven't taped yet, so I don't have any strong opinions. I tend just pre-tape. I tend to lean McMahon because I do think she's a better wrestler. One thing that I mentioned to you, Brett, I think just when we were talking about it, but I could be totally wrong here. And anyone who taped the fight who's listening to this probably knows more about this fight than me and how it will play out. But I just remember McMahon when she did kind of get taken down, and I do think like Pena did out scramble Zingano at times and get top position. I just remember McMahon against Tate when she actually got put on her back, kind of didn't know what was going on. But and just because she is a bit of a front runner, so I could see something dumb happening. Those would be like my 2 concerns. But did you watch that Tate fight? I haven't watched it in literally 3 years. It's always been something that I've remembered though.
Yeah, I did. I watched it after you mentioned it, and I mean, yeah, back then her grappling off her back was very poor. She didn't really understand, underhook concepts, which is crazy to me. But I'm sure she's developed a little bit. But I think ultimately it just comes down to who's going to be in top position. So yeah, McMahon isn't great off her back, and if Pena lands 3 takedowns in this fight, she's going to have a very good chance to win. It's hard for me to project Pena for maybe more than 1 takedown, 1 to 2 at most. I don't think she's a very good wrestler, and so I feel like I would be wrong about this fight more so because I don't project Pena to land many takedowns, and if she goes out there and lands 4 or 5 takedowns, then I'm just totally off here. But yeah, if Pena does land takedowns, McMahon's not going to be great off her back, and she might get herself into submission trouble.
Yeah, and one thing just to end is McMahon, she's a freestyle wrestler, and like there's in freestyle rules, which is in the Olympics, freestyle and Greco, but I'm talking about freestyle here because that's what she did. When you get a takedown, this is pretty much accurate, not always, but you get reset and put back on your feet, essentially. Like there's no holding someone down type of stuff where a lot of the D1 wrestlers, which is folk style or high school wrestling or little league wrestling in America, which I consider better for MMA because you learn how to get up. That's what folk style wrestling is. And man, a lot of these girls, there's no like, there is some college wrestling for women's, but not enough to where you are forced to really learn some of those concepts because you might just be good enough to have no one take you down. Where, in D1 men's wrestling, you're going to be forced to fight, wrestle out of those positions. So that can explain why she sucks once she's on the mat. So I know you said that's kind of a surprise for you, Brett, but that's kind of why, because her style of wrestling doesn't really focus on wrestling once you're on the mat as much. So, but yeah, like I'm interested in taping that fight. So, but I think that's everything. And I threw it over to you, Gugabe, but Brett, is there any other fight you are interested in a DraftKings perspective? And then, we can call it a day. I'm sure there are, but maybe one that really stands out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we've talked about the ones that I'm most excited for. I mean, Ottman as Itar will probably have some exposure to. Ike Calderwood, not really super interested in. Tavares, ACJ, meh. I mean, Evloev, I would assume you guys kind of think, I don't know if you've looked into Evloev Lentz, but Evloev's probably a lot more likely to win by decision there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think he's the most.
He should land takedowns. Lentz doesn't defend takedowns very well, and I feel like Lentz would be pretty tough to finish. And Evloev isn't really like a submission artist or big puncher.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I could see him not even trying to wrestle here because
Sure.
I think he might have a pretty big advantage on the feet. I don't know. He's the most expensive fighter on DraftKings, so Evloev's going to need a big score if he's worth that price, and I feel like he's not. But yeah, we covered pretty much everything I wanted to talk about.
Cool, man. Brett, I appreciate you coming on here. We bring you on big cards just to add some variety because Gugabe and I can be very boring at times. So I appreciate you coming on. And Gugabe, I think you and I will. When do we return? I think we have a break next weekend, and then we can do a podcast for. Isn't it Overeem Volkov coming up?
Do we? No, we do. We do have a break. Didn't realize. Overeem Volkov.
Yeah, I'm sure all three of us can kind of appreciate a break with 3 cards in 7 days. So that won't be
It's
bad.
just been 2 a.m. starts over here.
What's up?
I haven't slept. It's just been 2 a.m. starts over here. It's been fucked.
Oh, have you gotten any sleep?
I had about an hour. I had about an hour after the card. Okay.
So how are you doing this? Right? You seem like surprisingly sharp for being that tired.
Yeah. I don't know.
Gugabe's about to go run 10 miles after he gets off this pod.
Yeah, for sure.
Good shit.
Cool, man. Well, that's all I got. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Gugabe. And let's call it a day. And everyone enjoy the fights coming up, and good luck on all your plays.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
Peace.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.